Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer for RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. It is Tuesday morning, so it's time for our wavering video. We do this every week. Logan Glaser, contributing writer for RealTime Fantasy Sports, is going to join me this week to talk about all the waiver wire options out there. So, Logan, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. Excited for another week.
Yeah, and this week we have to mention the bye start. So Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, Las Vegas Raiders, and Tennessee Titans are all off. So fantasy owners have one more thing to deal with when they're setting their lineups.
For sure, yeah. And we had some recent drama in the game last night with Adams and shoving a cameraman, or photographer. So there might be a suspension incoming, as what was reported.
Yeah,
So he
not
might be in 2 weeks.
not good. Yeah. So yeah, the Raiders are off this week, and then the following week you could lose them for two straight weeks. Like you said, that's kind of a situation to watch. So I would be surprised if he's not suspended at this point. I don't know if you how your feelings are about it.
Yeah, it's sounding like one game with it, so we'll see.
Yep. All right, let's get into these options for this week. We kind of mentioned it already. Not a lot of great options out there for this week, unfortunately, and the bye starts. So it's getting a little tough at this point, but we're going to throw some guys out there we think could help still. So hopefully you're not digging too deep into your waivers this week. But let's start with the QB spot, Logan. Who's your guy you're looking at this week at the QB?
Yeah, for QB position, I'm going to be looking at Daniel Jones. So he's currently only owned in 34% of leagues. He's a warrior. The Giants are 4-1 with him as quarterback so far to start this year. He has 20 plus rushing yards every single game so far this year, including a 79-yard rush game. That I love that QBs that can rush for fantasy purposes. It just adds so much value to them because they're dual threat with being able to pass and run. Those rushing points are so crucial in fantasy from that QB spot, along with even a rushing touchdown inside of the 5 or a longer one. So I like him as my waiver pickup this week if you need a quarterback.
All right, I'll give you a couple guys. Mine's another New York guy, Zach Wilson. I feel like I've mentioned him the last few weeks. He didn't really have a great showing last week in the game, but he led his team to a win. It was a big win for them. He scored a rushing touchdown, and most importantly to me, he didn't turn the ball over. So he was really solid, didn't make any mistakes, and he seems to be growing each week, which I think is good for Wilson and the rest of the season. And he's still available in 61% of leagues on our site, roughly. So he's out there in a lot of leagues. And if you're looking for a spot starter in the right matchup, I would consider adding him. And another guy along those same lines, especially for this week, you're looking for a QB for this week. I like Jimmy Garoppolo with San Francisco. He really seems to be hitting his stride after a bit of a rough start when he was named the number one quarterback after Trey Lance got hurt. But he had his best game of the season in week 5, 18 of 30 for 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he also did not have a turnover. And he has not turned the ball over 2 straight games, so I think that's really encouraging. Thrown for at least 235 yards each of those games. And he plays the Falcons this week, who are not very good against the pass. It's a good time to spot start Garoppolo, and he's available in 53% of leagues on RT Sports. Let's move on to running back now, Logan. How about a couple running backs to consider adding?
Yeah, I think running back is going to be the most sought after this week through waivers because we had 4 teams that all have top running backs that are currently on buys this week. So we also had a big injury with Penny. So if Kenneth Walker is somehow available in your league, grab him for sure. But I believe he's only available in 10% of our leagues. But first one I'm going to be looking at is Samaje Perine for Cincinnati. He's only owned in 28% of leagues. He's playing really well in the opportunities that he's given. He's one injury away from Mixon from being plugged into starting lineups in all across all leagues. He had 9.6 point fantasy points last week as playing in that backup role, 4 receptions, 39 yards, and 17 rush yards as well. So I really like him to pick up. And another one is Mike Boone for Denver. So he's currently only owned at 56%. What scares me about him is his ceiling is pretty capped with Gordon and also Latavius Murray being brought in. So I feel like he has a capped ceiling, but I think if you have one of those running backs that are on a buy, you can go ahead and plug him into your lineup and look for 7 to 10 points from him this week.
All right, a couple guys for me. I like both those choices, Logan. One of them's Eno Benjamin with Arizona. They're really beat up at running back. James Conner left the game early with a rib injury. Darrell Williams, Jonathan Ward also beat up. So it kind of leaves Benjamin as the last man standing. I'm not sure if he's going to start, if Connor's going to be able to play. We should know more later in the week. But either way, I think Benjamin could have a pretty big role in that game. Ran 8 times for 25 yards and a touchdown last week. Also had 3 catches for 28 yards. So we have some good total yardage potential in that offense. And he's available in 65% of leagues on our site. So he's a guy I would considering picking up if you're looking for a plug and play option for this week. And another one here is kind of more of a speculative ad, but Joshua Kelley, he had his best game last week as well, ran 10 times for 49 yards and a touchdown, also caught 2 passes for 33 yards, and he was really good in the preseason, earned that number 2 job with the Los Angeles Chargers. And Austin Eckler's gotten a lot of work to date, and I'm not sure they're going to keep that heavy workload on him because, he's kind of a brittle back with past history and his size and his injury problems in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kelley starts getting a couple more chances on a weekly basis. So I like him as a speculative grab because he's available in 91% of leagues on real-time fantasy sports. Let's move on to receiver now, Logan. A couple guys that you're looking at for this week.
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking at Jacoby Myers as my first wide receiver. He's currently only owned in 64% of leagues, and he has quietly been one of the best wide receivers. So he's actually averaging 18 fantasy points in games that he's played in so far, which is 3. He's got 27 targets in those 3 games. He's had several different quarterbacks from Mac Jones to Zappy thrown to him, and he's connected well with both of them. So I really like Jacoby Myers, and if he's available in your league, I would definitely grab him. And he's got very good potential right there. And then another one is Marquez Valdez for KC. I don't like going with Kansas City wide receivers, but this next week between KC and Buffalo is going to be an absolute shootout, as we can recall from their previous matchups. So I really like rostering anyone in that game because it's going to be easily the highest over-under on the slate next week. So I expect that to be a shootout. MVS had 6 receptions for 90 yards last night. So another solid performance from him. So
I think he's kind of emerging too as that go-to target in that passing game. They're using him more, not just as a deep threat, which I think is encouraging for him. And Juju's been kind of non-existent of late. And your Jacoby Myers call is a good one as well. I don't understand why he wasn't drafted more personally. You could tell he's going to be the number 1 receiver in that offense. I have a lot of shares of him.
Yeah, less than 2/3 of, or less than 1/3 of leagues that has Myers. So that really surprised me.
Yeah, really surprising. All right, a couple guys for me. One of them is Darius Slayton. So he was the top receiver for the Giants last week. They're all beat up at receiver, just a mess. All sorts of guys hurt, but he had 6 catches for 79 yards on 7 targets. And for whatever reason, he was not enamored by that coaching staff to start the year, but now he's starting to get chances. And I think he could be the top receiver in this offense in that next few games. You mentioned Daniel Jones as your waiver wire pick at QB. So I think this offense is starting to click, and I like Slayton going forward, especially the next 2 games. Ravens, Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 really good matchups. He's available in nearly every league on our site, 99%. So he's likely available in your league. So if you need a receiver for this week, I would consider looking at Slayton. And my other one is Nico Collins. I think we mentioned him last week on the show. I can't remember if it was me or Evan who did the show with me last week. But either way, I like Nico Collins as well this week. He had a 2nd straight game with double-digit fantasy points, 7 catches for 147 yards those last 2 games. He was pegged for a breakout candidate this year. It seems like he's finally finding his footing, and I like him a lot going forward. And he's still available in 75% of leagues. I think that's going to keep going down going forward. He really has a high ceiling, in my opinion, for the rest of this year. Let's move on to tight end now, Logan. The big one, I guess we can't not mention him, is Taysom Hill. He's probably available in, I think, roughly around 60% of leagues on our site, but I still think he's a dangerous play because you don't know where those touches are going to come from. And if he doesn't score a TD, he's probably going to be a bust. But what's your feelings on Hill?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely a risk starting him each week because, he can go out there and he can get you 2 points from just 20 yards of rushing, not getting in the end zone, or he can go out and put up 30-plus points like he did last week. So he's played 4 games so far, and he had 1 great game, 1 average game, and 2 below average games. So it's definitely a risky play slotting him in your lineups. It would probably be better if you had him in a best ball format overall, personally, just because of the high.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually like him more so when Jameis Winston's out of the lineup too. I think he's going to be get less playing time once Winston's back
Yeah,
healthy.
and the
Just
Saints
something.
wide receivers are also very banged up from Thomas, Landry. Olave's a little hurt, so
Yeah.
the Saints have really been relying on that run game last
All right.
weekend.
That said, who's your tight end pick for this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Daniel Bellinger as my tight end for the Giants. So we've got 3 Giants players out here. So he's currently only owned in 9% of leagues. He's a rookie tight end. He's been averaging 9 points per game so far, 2 touchdowns in 4 games. He hasn't been great with yardage so far, so that kind of concerns me. But for putting up 9 points per game, that's not bad for a tight end, especially with how we've mentioned tight ends class has kind of been iffy so far. And rookie tight ends usually struggle a lot, so he's actually had a very good start for a rookie tight end. As like Hawkinson struggled when he was with Detroit his first year, Pitts struggled with Atlanta. So I really like to start with Bellinger so far in that Giants offense.
Yeah, I like that call on him too. My tight end is Evan Ingram. He had a season high 10 targets in that week 5 game, caught 6 passes for 69 yards, but he's been pretty good all year. He has at least 4 receptions, 3 of 5 games. He's been pretty consistent. I think he has a pretty good weekly floor in that Jaguars passing game that they like to throw the ball a lot. And he's still available in 58% of leagues. So I like him a lot as a guy if you're looking for somebody to play if somebody's off for you this week with Detroit or the Raiders. Well, Waller's banged up, so you might be looking at somebody there as well. So just somebody I would consider picking up is Evan Ingram. All right, Logan, we like to give everybody a streaming defense, kind of what we kind of preach as well. We like to do the streaming options when it comes to our own teams personally. So let's give somebody a streaming option for this week at defense. Who do you got?
Defense, I'm going to go with the Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers. They're going up against Denver Broncos. So earlier we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we wanted anyone facing Chicago's offense, even Seattle's offense, which I don't know if that's the case anymore. But Denver's offense has looked probably one of the worst in the NFL so far. Russell Wilson's even came out and said that he has a little bit of an injury. Don't know about that, but he's played terrible so far. So I'm going to be rostering Chargers defense, their own about 50% of leagues. So in leagues that they're available, I'm going to be looking to pick them up and play them this week.
Yeah, my streaming defense is a little more of a reach. I think it's a little scarier, but still, I think I like them this week. Chicago Bears, they're available in 83% of leagues. So they play the Washington Commanders. They're just a turnover-prone team. So if you're looking to get some turnovers on this defensive side of the ball, I think Washington could get them this week against Chicago. And Justin Fields just isn't very good. He has not impressed me at all. Bears have interceptions all but a game this year, multiple sacks, 2 games as well. So I think they're a good option this week, and they could post some pretty good numbers in that matchup against Washington. All right, Logan, thanks for joining me again, doing our wavering video. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Yeah, it should be a good week. A lot of good games again. We have some bye weeks as well, but good luck to everybody out there, and especially good luck navigating those waiver wires too. All right, Logan. Thanks again. This has been Jeff Paur for RealTime Fantasy Sports.
And this has been Logan Glaser from RealTime Fantasy Sports.
Have a great day, everyone.